Some of you all may be aware of this, but some of you might not, especially the organizations who were connecting with us from early on. Katie mentioned the purpose of data collection for us is continuous improvement, right? So when we rebooted Hanser Consulting 5 years ago, can you imagine? It was 5 years ago now. We had 4 main key levers that got grounded our organization, right? Some of y'all may remember those were strategy, curriculum design, professional learning, evaluation. And those key levers served us really well for about 3.5 years. But as we were looking at the data and we were thinking specifically around the data for strategy, right? We were continuing to build our professional learning space, but those were kind of 2 separate things. We realized that while our process for strategy was excellent and we had varied outcomes, right, with our clients as we were checking in with them 1, 2, and 3 years later, right? So, Katie and I in particular, when we were talking about strategy, we asked ourselves the question like, wow, what separates the good from the great in that strategy space, right? Why did some organizations tap us after 3 years stating that they had executed on all of their priorities and goals and were ready for a refresh, while others shared that, they weren't quite ready, or that, it quite frankly wasn't as effective for them as in other spaces, right? So what we came to realize after asking more questions, seeking to understand, was that in almost all the organizations that were less effective, they had challenging workplace cultures. Wow, let's think about that. So as I'm sure we have all heard, right, the Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, Katie and I were like, that is absolutely true, right? You can have, a really buttoned up strategy with great next steps and a worked out work plan so everybody knows what they're doing differently tomorrow. But if you're coming into a toxic workplace culture or a workplace culture where people are not seen, safe, and heard in their full humanity, it's very difficult to execute on that work effectively, right? So the answer for us was to still focus on strategy, training, and evaluation, which is what we have always focused on, but to do so now with the intention of creating conscious cultures in the workplace. Okay, so yes, that the values and the key levers that we had before are still true today, but now they're not in isolation. Before we used to be understood by the community as kind of a technical assistance partner. Now we are a partner that helps you to think about how to create conscious cultures within your organization. So I'm going to share with you now our revised mission here that we so proudly share now with the world, which is that we support organizational leaders to create cultures where people are seen in their full humanity and honor one another's lived experience, thus maximizing organizational impact. And what we really want to emphasize here is leadership. Leaders are the ones who create the conditions for a positive workplace culture to take place, right? And we believe that if those workplace conditions are person-centered, seeking to see people in their full humanity, then we can maximize organizational impact, right? Remember, we believe, and for those of you who have participated in Conscious Ambassadorship recently, we really emphasize this point around workspaces that are both accountable and honor the human dignity of those who are doing the work, right? And we believe that both things can be true. And also, for those of you who haven't yet seen this, we are so excited to share our conscious culture tree with you. So this conscious culture tree, if you can imagine, each organization is really represented as the tree, right? And each organization is rooted in shared values. Whether you write those values down, reinforce them, talk about them. Quite frankly, of course, we want that to happen. But even if that doesn't happen, we still get a feel and a vibe and an understanding for what organizations are like on our first day working in a new organization. And by way of how they interact with one another, by way of how they make decisions, right, within that organization, we can come to understand what organizations value, right? So stated or not, we would prefer that they are stated, right? We know that organizations are rooted in shared values, and those shared values are upheld by conscious leaders, all of you, right? They're upheld by conscious leaders who nurture and promote growth within your organization, thus your tree here, through conscious colleagues that live the behaviors that align to those values, right? And, of course, every single tree and every single organization is kind of pruned in a different way, perhaps watered with a different concoction. So when we look at that watering can and what it means to water our tree, thus promoting a conscious culture, right? We do that through that combination of training, strategy, and evaluation. So when we think about the process for that work, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of these things for you today, right? Sometimes organizations begin with assess, evaluate, redesign. Some begin with conscious ambassadorship. We are going to learn today, we're going to hear from Katie again, who's going to talk to us about our conscious culture assessment, right? Which is a way to figure out how conscious your culture is, right? So that then we have some baseline data so that when we go through this process and we assess again, that we can see how we're moving the needle and be data driven, right? To think about how we adapt and change course in terms of the plan, right? Certifying conscious ambassadors, as we know, is absolutely essential, particularly starting with leadership. We want to align organizational values to behaviors, whether you have them or not, whether you need a refresh, whether we need to create new ones, right? We walk you through that process. Then we have that strategic implementation where we want to weave not only how to do the work, but the values-based work that you're doing into the fabric of your organization through that strategic implementation. And then we have ongoing professional development, which is promoting that conscious culture as well. Okay. And of course, as you all know who we are at Hanser Consulting, we are constantly in a state of gathering data to drive our decision making.